a grown man. I like sugar in my coffee, and I don't like scary movies, but this story is going somewhere.
Writer, director Joshua Recene brings us Demon Behind the Glass. And this is a movie about this disgraced reporter who is trying to get back in the game by doing a story on fracking. So he has arranged to rent out this particular kind of house. And when he gets there, he actually finds that there is a body stuffed behind a mirror. And the police seem to be unwilling to remove it because they want him to ultimately be responsible for any damages in removing it. But because it's not his actual property, he's just renting it, he's kind of refused to. So they leave the body in there for the time being. And anyway, this reporter ends up interviewing this woman who is to do with this kind of fracking situation. And the pair of them get embroiled in a plot involving a kind of a demonic cult and sort of possessions and people wanting to kind of be possessed and things like this, and they're being chased around by various demonic forces. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So often on this channel in the past I have likened things to various movies, and sometimes that movie happens to be The Evil Dead. I feel there's a lot of movies that try and emulate The Evil Dead, and I'm kind of going to do it again, but be a little bit more specific, because this movie, the plot and the kind of the tone of the film, more importantly, reminds me of the TV series of Evil Dead, and it was called Ash versus the Evil Dead, because that had more of a comedic and irreverent tone, I would say, than the movies, even though the movies ended up being more comedic. So yeah, this movie reminds me of tonally at least, of the Ash vs Evil Dead series, because it's kind of like a wacky hijinks movie in some ways, but it kind of has serious horror elements as well. So let's discuss. So this movie, I would suggest, like again, if you like that Ash vs Evil Dead series, it's relatively kind of fast paced. There is kind of always something about to happen, some wacky event that involves demonic forces. Sometimes it's quite splattery, sometimes it has a kind of comedic edge, you know, so it kind of reminds me of that. So if you like that sort of tone and that pace, then you might like this movie. Secondly, and kind of still keeping with that, I thought the interplay between our main characters, this journalist and this kind of pregnant woman who he originally was going to interview, I have to say I really enjoyed. The kind of the banter between them. They're two strangers ultimately, but they end up both getting thrust in this kind of adventure, not really knowing that much about one another, but having to kind of rely on the other, but not fully trust them to survive this crazy adventure. And you know, there's kind of shenanigans that are going on, but I just really like their performance. And again, it will give you that kind of that banter that was, I would say, maybe more famous from the Evil Dead series. So that was kind of quite fun, and there are some kind of kookier other characters. The VFX, and this is a low budget movie, but I've got to say I thought the VFX were kind of quite fun. We have like a mummified like ghoul, I guess you want to call him, that's kind of chasing everyone around. He goes into kind of Super Saiyan mode and sort of turns into this kind of like more elaborate kind of demonic form. Various kind of like misty effects and stuff like that. There's quite a lot going on, and you know, it was a fun, enjoyable experience kind of watching these kind of crazy over the top effects and kind of and things like this. The movie actually has quite a let's call it advanced plot in some ways. The plot is actually not all that simple. Now, that is a double-edged sword, and I'll come back onto that, but you know, this isn't simply an A to B storyline. There is actually a fair amount of dense plotting in this movie. So, you know, it pays to kind of somewhat pay attention, and even though this movie has this kind of more of a comedic feel, yeah, so there's kind of that. But let's now, with that in mind, transition to what doesn't work. I have to be honest with you, this movie I found, the plot-wise, kind of confusing. I feel like it's all over the place in the journey of the plot in regards to little side characters and things like this. And I have to feel like I thought the overall, the narrative kind of gets lost in this movie. The movie, I should say, has this kind of sort of frantic feel in some scenes, which is kind of fun, but you feel like you're missing things that you're meant to be kind of taking in and stuff like that. And it's just a little bit convoluted for its kind of own good, I have to say. So when you're watching this, you're kind of just thinking, I don't really know what's kind of going on. I know the broad strokes of the story, but it's kind of some of the intricacies I feel are lost on me. So yeah, I did think this movie was a little overstuffed with and needed to have a clearer narrative in kind of some respects. And I think, although it is a fun tonal kind of movie in regards to its shifting sort of tonal elements to it, again, you're not quite sure how to take it, because you're not really sure if you're watching a comedy and I'm not supposed to be taking it too seriously, but then there are elements where you feel the movie does take it seriously. You're thinking, is this a serious bit, or is this kind of like more of a jokey bit? And it's kind of hard to really know what the movie's trying to say. I feel there is maybe too many little characters in this. We have this cult situation, and it's kind of just like who's who, and it's not clearly defined enough. And because of all those factors, I feel the movie kind of loses the potential interest that it might have had. There's some fun visual elements on this screen, but I feel the story really lacks in sort of bringing you along for the ride, and therefore isn't as fun as a kind of a narrative experience ultimately. So you know, it kind of feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity. Now the VFX, I don't mind a lower budget movie, but I will be remiss in saying that, yeah, some of the effects are of the cheaper standard, and there's kind of CGI enhancements that look like CGI enhancements. Most of the work is practical, I would say, but well, they have used some CGI elements. I feel it kind of sticks out a little bit. And I feel the movie could have been a little bit more bloody. There are still some elements here, but I think it could have lent into a little bit more gore, if I'm honest, because it could have really lent into the kind of the Evil Dead comparisons then. So overall, I think this has a fun element to it, but I can't help but feel this could have been a more of a entertaining film overall had there been a greater grip on the kind of the narrative element. And you know, I've said it many times before, where you have one person, which is kind of a singular driving force behind these indie movies, I don't feel they ever really look towards anyone else and kind of get the feedback saying, you know, maybe from an outsider's perspective, things could be a little different. So, you know, it's the curse of indie filmmaking, especially in this kind of the horror and fantasy genre and stuff like that. So as it stands, I'm going to give this movie a 5 out of 10. It's a kind of a fun watch, even though it's a little bit of a messy one. How are you seeing it? What did you think? Please do leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.